Today's video is about the rise of autism in Gen Z. Now, there has been some debate about autism, about how the fact that a lot of people in Gen Z and Millennials many people now are being diagnosed with autism more than ever. And there's been some debate as to why this is. And I'd like to talk about it for myself, about why I believe what I believe could be the reason for the increase in diagnosis of autism. Like, I think when I was a young child, most people who were on the spectrum probably weren't diagnosed because they were much harder, because they weren't as good at detecting at that point. They weren't as good at diagnosing it. However, even at that point, the diagnosis was increasing. Like, the diagnosis of autism has always been increasing. Like, for every new decade, there's more and more people being diagnosed, and I think it's because we are just far better at actually detecting autism. We're far better at being able to tell who is autistic, because there's far more awareness and far more understanding of autism than there used to be. There have been some people online that have suggested that maybe there are autistic people that are claiming to be autistic but are not. That is what there have been some people who have said. And one of those people I've heard say this is a YouTuber named Isaac Butterfield. He, of course, has made some interesting points, and I don't really agree with a lot of what he says, even though I think that some points, I think that, I do get where he's coming from on. But I'd like to basically respond to some of the points that he makes today. He is entitled to his opinion, I just want to make that perfectly clear, but this is just my personal opinion on how it differs from his, and I will acknowledge when I think that he does make good points as well.
I have a brother who has very severe autism. He has never been able to talk, he can't look after himself, and his life itself, as much as he has fun and is a beautiful person, it's been difficult. Particularly very brutal for my mum, who's been his number one carer for his entire 30 years. So when I see everyone being diagnosed with autism, I start thinking, hang on a second, you don't have autism? What are you talking about? You said you have autism. Okay. Yes, I was diagnosed with autism at 22. And I think this is a problem too. Like, people who are seen as relatively normal looking, I think there needs to be a different word. That's all I'm saying. But my son is autistic and you're nothing like him. Okay, this is pretty much my argument at the moment, all right, about my brother. Probably because I'm an adult woman, autism is a spectrum. Agreed. But there should be a different way to diagnose people, a different word, something different here, okay? Like, I am absolutely fine with this lady being on the same spectrum, but why is the spectrum so vast? Stop being so vast. We need to narrow down these diagnoses, surely.
He says that if somebody is completely normal looking, then maybe they're not really autistic, or they should be diagnosed with, at least with something else that's not autism. Well, you see, I don't really agree on that. In a lot of cases, there are autistic people who are able to mask, who are able to hide the fact that they're autistic and pass as neurotypical. Basically, they feel like they've basically learned to mask, they've learned to basically hide their autism, and in some cases this might increase anxiety levels because they feel like they need to put on an act like people who are not autistic. Now, when I was younger, I used to really put on an act and pretend to be normal all the time, and honestly, it just made me extremely anxious when I got it wrong, so I don't really tend to try as hard to appear normal anymore. But also, Isaac, I mean, what about the people who were, like, you are saying that you don't believe that people who appear normal should be classed as having autism, but what about the fact that there are a lot of people who, when they were first diagnosed with autism, were much more severely, like, they appeared to be much more severely autistic. But obviously, I mean, I'm not saying they've got less autistic, they haven't. Like, you can't get less autistic, but you can, however, learn skills to cope with having autism, and you can achieve things, you can achieve ways to mask, and you can learn new skills. And in some cases, there can be people who were much more obvious when they were younger, but as they've got older, they've learned to mask it, and now it's not obvious. Like, are you suggesting that they were autistic then, but now they're not anymore? Like, I don't really agree on that, personally. Now, he has also suggested that some people, especially like on TikTok and so on, are claiming to be autistic, but are just a bit different or are just a bit quirky, so to speak, and are not really autistic.
But I think a lot of the people who really genuinely believe they have autism don't. I think a lot of people just Google symptoms and then diagnose themselves with them and then go on to go to the doctors and get diagnosed with something because they know what they're looking for. Take ADHD, for example. How many people are now on ADHD medication because they know exactly what symptoms to ask about at the doctor? Then they get referred to a specialist and then they get given Ritalin. It's almost like a marketing scheme and the doctors are in on it. It's very, very strange.
Is it possible that there are people who are just claiming to be autistic but are not autistic? It is possible. I'm not going to say it's 100% impossible. Like, there can certainly be people who are claiming to be that are not. It's not something I'd rule out. However, I would still say I think that there can be a bit of a problem with just deciding who is or isn't, because at that point it's like who gets to decide who's faking it and who's not? Like, is it fair to basically look at somebody who's like, they don't seem like they're genuinely autistic? Like, it kind of is just going to open the gateway for a lot of people to accuse people who genuinely are autistic but just are not obvious of faking it. I remember even in one of my old videos from 2012, there were people commenting that I wasn't really autistic on that as well. There were people who were claiming, oh, he just seems normal to me, or he this seems like a normal guy with low confidence, or something along those lines, or that this person can talk. How are they autistic? Like, there are still people who have these stereotypes of autism in their mind. But I do still understand where people are coming from by the diagnosis increasing, or the fact that some people are self-diagnosing now and are claiming to be autistic. But I also have heard though that for some people that self-diagnose, it might be too expensive to afford to be able to get an official diagnosis, so they feel like the self-diagnosis helps them. But I still personally do kind of think though that autism can certainly be diagnosed as other things, and other things can be diagnosed as autism, or misdiagnosed, if you will. Like, it's not impossible. Now, Isaac also says that autism is nothing to be proud of.
I'm going to say something right now that's going to shock a lot of you. Autism is nothing to be proud of. That's a horrible thing to say, but hear me out. I see so many people talk about their autism and autism this and autism that, and they treat it like it's this superpower. And I understand where that's coming from. But for a lot of people, autism is the most disastrous thing that has happened in their lives. It affects them so terribly that they can't exist in the world how they would like to. And for a lot of people, their children who are affected by autism will struggle until their very last breath.
So a few things I'd like to say about this. I think it's important to acknowledge that autism can be difficult and challenging, and there can be a lot of difficult aspects to being autistic. I think this is a very important point to be aware of. However, with that said, for some people who are on the autistic spectrum, there can absolutely be advantages to having autism. Now, should we make out that autism is purely a good thing and there's absolutely nothing negative about it at all? I don't really agree. I don't think we should do that. I think that there are definitely negative aspects to it, and it can very much impact a person's life, without a doubt. However, with that said, I don't think acknowledging the positive aspects of autism is a bad thing at all, whether that be an autistic person or a parent of somebody with autism. I do think there can be a problem when you start saying that autism is always a positive thing in every way. Like, I can imagine that can feel stigmatizing when somebody is in a very, very severe category where they are non-verbal, and they'll always be non-verbal, and they'll never be able to feed themselves or do the very basic skills. However, I do think there needs to be a balance. However, I don't think that acknowledging the fact that autism does bring forth advantages is a bad thing either. I'm not proud of having autism, in all honesty. I do actually agree with him there. I would not say that me being autistic means I'm proud of it. I'm not ashamed of it either. Like, I'm neither proud nor ashamed. It's not really a good thing or a bad thing for me. It's just a neutral thing. It's just a part of who I am as a person. And there are negative aspects to it, and it has been very difficult to live with autism at points, and it has been impactful, but there have certainly been advantages to it as well. And I do, however, get where he's coming from, in the sense that I think that when self-diagnosed autistic adults, or even autistic adults who have lived a very normal life despite being on the autistic spectrum, even if they have been officially diagnosed with it, I don't think it's fair that they can speak on behalf of every autistic person when they say it's not a disability at all, because that can really minimise how impactful autism can be on certain people. Well, thank you all for watching. I do hope you enjoyed this video, And please do let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe autism is rising, or do you believe that autism is just being overdiagnosed now, or what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're new here, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And even though I don't post here very often now, I do every now and again. So take care, goodbye for now.